is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Hey, good afternoon, America. Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. You can catch us every day here at LaffeyRadio.com, and more of you are. Appreciate some of the phone calls, emails we've gotten the last couple of days. Like us on Facebook at Laffey Radio on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. We're out every day. We produce product every day, and we'd like you to pass it around. And I'm thankful that you guys and ladies out there are doing so. Today is Newsday Tuesday, and 3 o'clock Eastern Time we go on live. It's 1 o'clock here in the great city of Fort Collins. Beautiful weather outside, and people getting ready for Thanksgiving. See, a storm is coming. We'll do a special Thanksgiving show tomorrow. Well, I'll put on some more casual clothes, I suppose. Maybe bring the kids in. In fact, I'm sure I will. But anyway, there's a lot of news story to talk about. We got a lot of great clips to play. But I was working out just before the show started. Not just before, about an hour and a half ago. Then I took a shower. Don't worry. And I things come across the news, and the way that they come across is always befuddling to me. Just stuff that you think people be outraged about. And so across the news, this was on Fox News, so I printed off the Fox News story, but it was on other news cycles. It just came out a couple hours ago. There's a Hollywood producer, made a ton of movies, 120 movies, big ones with Martin Sikorsky and Roman Polanski and so forth, Oliver Stone and Robert De Niro, and this guy's name is Arnon Milchan. He grew up in Israel, I guess, but basically he admits that he was a spy for Israel while in America. He's in Israel now. And the article just goes on. In a far-reaching interview aired Monday with Israel's Channel 2, he talked about how he was a spy and how he helped purchase technologies Israel allegedly needed to operate nuclear bombs. And the article just goes on and it ends. In fact, it ends with De Niro, whose last movie now I've seen, because De Niro had heard it was true, but he wasn't sure. He asked him once. This is a guy who made things like Pretty Woman and Fight Club, L.A. Confidential, very successful movie maker. De Niro says, I did ask him once, and he told me that he was an Israeli, and of course he would do these things for his country. So De Niro, the guy tells De Niro he's a spy. De Niro does nothing about it. Who knows where these nuclear technologies went? How did he get a hold of them? The newscasters on the news, as I was working out, they just kind of smiled at the end, like, I wonder if they're going to try to extradite him, and went on to another story rather than, what? Who was he doing this with? Who was he involved in? With? Nothing. There'll be no follow-up, and there'll certainly be no follow-up from our administration. Now, I didn't catch, it was too close. I didn't get a chance to even look this guy up, whether or not he's a U.S. citizen, an Israeli citizen, whatever he is, but he's actually on TV today saying he spied against America for Israel. Now, Israel, it goes back to this whole thing. We know everybody spies on everybody, fine. But there should be some bit of outrage somewhere in the newscast, and somebody right now should be trying to get him back to this country. Believe me, this will be the last you hear of this story. It'll be a little side story, and De Niro will go off saying, oh yeah, I guess he told me to spy, but nuclear secrets? He had possession of nuclear secrets? Is that possible? And gave them to Israel? Anyway, that's shocking story number one of the day. There's a lot of stories like that today. And the other thing, I was working out, and of course I'm switching channels. And there's, a giant story going on today in the Ukraine. It's not on the news. It's not in the newspapers. Had to go watch France TV to see people rioting. I shouldn't say rioting. It's about 20,000 people. They're outside of the jailed former prime minister, Yulia Tymoshenko. These names get hard. I mean, I tried my best with them, but let's call her Yulia. She was the prime minister. She's now in jail on some trumped-up charges because the current president, and this is where it gets really difficult in the Ukraine. You've got Yanukovych and Yushchenko, both first names Victor. Yanukovych is the president now of the country. He took over after the Orange Revolution in 2005, roughly 2005, from Yushchenko. We can't say his name. So he's jailed, the former prime minister, because he's afraid she's going to run against him in 2015. I guess they have 5-year terms. But the importance of this story is that it's not in the papers today. And the importance of the Ukraine. The Ukraine is one of the most important places geographically in the world. Why? Go get a map. I brought in a map. I don't think it shows very well on TV, but get a map. And look to its east. You see Russia. The Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Ukraine's one of these places, the breadbasket of Europe, where the western part of the Ukraine is more associated with Europe, the eastern part more associated with Russia. And they've been trying to go back and forth where Russia, and this is important for foreign policy, Russia now is extending its strength, especially after the President Obama's disaster in Syria. And so the Ukraine plays a pivotal point for U.S. foreign policy. And we've got to do more, and we've got to do something about bringing the Ukraine into the European orbit, into the Western orbit, not into the Eastern Russian orbit, because the more that Russia can get a stranglehold over the Ukraine, which it's trying to do, and by the way, about 20% of all of the natural gas used in Europe, roughly, I think it's about 20%, comes from Russia, first of all, through the pipeline that goes to the Ukraine. So here's Putin now as an oversized giant, right? Because he's the guy helping out in Syria, in America, taking another notch down in world opinion, especially probably in the Ukraine, and in Europe, where people are saying, what's going on with America? And the Ukraine, of course, doesn't want to fall back totally into being controlled by Russia, but they need this natural gas to come through the country. Europe needs it. And so they want Ukraine to join the EU. But the EU, the European Union, is not going to let Ukraine join without releasing former President Yulia. And so now she's on a hunger strike. And it's not her first hunger strike. And, I'm not saying I hope it's her last, but she's on a real hunger strike. And now you've got people outside, 20,000 people demonstrating with police holding them back. America should be saying something about this. These are the kind of things that we've got to find a way in our foreign policy, which we talked about yesterday, of getting these other countries that don't like us to spend more of their goodwill, more of their currency, when we don't have to spend anything. And so this is an extremely important topic. It is nowhere to be found, in my opinion, in American news. Yet when you go to French TV, it's the lead story. I didn't check Russian TV. Russian TV, I'm sure they probably, using it in a different way, talking about what a terrible lady this was. She's not a terrible lady, by the way. She should not be in jail. She is in ill health, and she should be released. And we should be putting pressure on that. President Obama not doing anything about it. Our Congress, I don't even think most people in Congress know what the Ukraine is. Democrat, Republican, they have no idea what I'm talking about. This may be the only TV, radio show talking about this today. I'm sure people doing their Thanksgiving deals are doing whatever they're doing today, right? Attacking Obama. And of course, the website doesn't work. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about more policies being canceled. But it's extremely important to include the Ukraine in our foreign policy and to have good relationships and try to bring their new president, who's more aligned with Russia, into our orbit. Because it's a critical thing. I mean, if you look at the Ukraine and go down the Sea of Azov, you look at the Black Sea going south of the Ukraine. Belarus is up to the north of it. Russia to the east. Europe basically to the west, and Poland comes up in the. It's got to be one of the most important places in the world. And we have a foreign policy that Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, don't even know where it is. I don't think. We should be making statements today about it. We should be backing the release of this political prisoner now, the former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko. And we're not. And we are so far removed here in America from even knowing what's going on and how important this is. If the Ukraine falls back into the Soviet, the Russian orbit, as he's trying to put together the old Soviet Union again, that's what Putin is attempting to do through his nationalist behavior. If that ever happens, Europe be threatened with troops closer. I mean, the Russians do keep a fleet in the south in that Black Sea. Just I guess, I don't know if it's part of the Ukraine or just south of it, but they still keep a fleet there. Russia will be threatened. Western Europe will be threatened. So I try to point these things out. This hunger, there are some articles that just came out. The EU says here, right, considers Tymoshenko's imprisonment politically motivated. It will not sign any deal unless she is released. She's freed. It's not her first hunger strike. And of course, the current president, Viktor Yanukovych, has resisted the EU pressure, apparently fearing that Yulia Tymoshenko, whom he closely defeated in 2010, is going to run against him. So he's got a lady in prison. It seems like something out of Peter the Great in the old Russian times, not back in the 1700s. We've got people just sitting in prison in a duly constitutional, representative government for really seemingly no reason at all. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing what's going on around the world and how little. I mean, by the way, Syria will be on the news tonight, be on the news tomorrow. We'll talk about Iran on Monday. All these things in the Middle East are always in the news, every day since I was a little kid. Then geographically extremely important areas, like the Ukraine, and I'll say it again, like the Ukraine. It's an extremely important area. It's a country we should be doing all we can to entice it, to encourage it, to trade with it, to move out of the Russia control. It's going to be very difficult to do, and it may be impossible. But the more we spend time, the more the Russians spend money. The more we entice people for freedom, the worse it looks for Russia. And the Russian people, hopefully one day will get sick of the way things are being run in Russia. That's a long shot now. It seems as though the Russians throughout the history of mankind, not mankind, but all the way back to the czars, that they still have this attitude, and it's an old saying in Russia. I can't speak Russian, but it's basically, if only the Tsar knew, if only Peter the Great, if only Catherine the Great, if only Nicholas knew, then he'd take care of us. And there's still some of that in Russia today, even though it's a country that's losing its population by the millions, by the way. It can barely feed itself. A third of what it produces is oil. It jails people who are successful, who speak out for freedom. We do nothing about it. We speak out. We don't say anything about it. And we allow Putin to become a stronger player. And in Ukraine, the Europeans are looking at this. And the Americans are nowhere. Absolutely nowhere on this. So, anyway, we can move on to another topic. But you need to keep an eye on the Ukraine. Our government needs to keep an eye on the Ukraine. We need to do more for the Ukraine and to get them back in orbit. Here's another story I wanted to go before we go to a break. Just a short one. I scan articles and I read quickly. And I scanned over this article and it said retired players sue and I thought it said NFL over head injuries. I said, my God, I thought that suit was resolved. I talked about it on a show about football and the concussions and nothing but getting worse. And all of us watching football, it just gives us, should we be watching football is what I asked myself, even though I've watched some of the game. My daughter's a big Patriots fan, and we watched some of the game the other night. But it's actually the NHL. Retired players sue the National Hockey League over head injuries. And we don't think about it as much, but I guess a lot of NHL retired players are coming down with the same kind of concussion-related injuries, debilitating injuries to their heads, affecting their memories. And it goes through some of these people. There's a guy named, I don't follow hockey, unless your name's Bennett. I grew up with the Bennett family. That's just Bennett. I really don't follow hockey. I follow only Mac Bennett now at University of Michigan. If you want to look him up, he's a great young man. Hopefully he played in the NHL, drafted by the Canadiens. His father's a great friend of mine and helped me out when I was back home and grew up with the family. But there's a family of Derek Bugard has a wrongful death lawsuit. Something's got to happen with all these. I mean, there's so many people getting hurt. And I go back to this one thing. I'm just so glad my father didn't let me play football. He let me do anything else. He just let me play football. Anyway, it's Steve Laffey here. It's Newsday Tuesday. We've got to take a quick break. But please, go to LaffeyRadio.com. After the show's over, it just goes up. You can watch it on demand. We have a self-loading app that we don't talk about enough. So you can actually take our self-loading app. You can put on Laffey Radio, if you've got an iPhone like I do here, and you can just play it in the car as you're driving. Any of our shows, play it on demand. It becomes a self-loading app. But anyway, we'll take a quick break. Steve Laffey, LaffeyRadio.com. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends.
In biology,
In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch,
I'm a loser.
in chemistry, I learned that no one likes
In
me.
biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid.
In English,
pay and benefits in return. The Coast Guard Reserve is important work. I get to serve my community, and it's always rewarding.
If you were born ready, there's a new challenge waiting for you. Learn about serving part-time at gocoastguard.com/reserve.
So you take the mouse and click over there, and then you can choose someone you want to call.
My niece. I click here?
Uh-huh.
This is Louisa. Recently she got help going online to chat with her family back home.
Okay, so then you want to hit that green button.
This is her first time on the internet and her first time seeing her niece in 5 years. Louisa doesn't know what to expect.
Louisa? Oh my gosh. There she is. This is amazing.
It's so good to see you! You look so pretty!
But this is definitely way beyond.
Oh my gosh.
See what the internet can help you do at everyoneon.org or call 1-855-387-9166 to find a free training class near you. That's 1-855-387-9166.
Oh, I've missed you.
Oh, me too.
Brought to you by Connect to Compete and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
President Obama calls those 5 million cancellations of individual health care policies a mistake and a misunderstanding. His critics call it an outright lie and a deception. Tonight, Chief National Correspondent Jim Engel tells us the administration knew millions more policies would be canceled, but said the opposite.
The president may be doing a lot more apologizing because almost 80 million policies from small and large employers are likely to be canceled along with individual policies because they don't meet the requirements of Obamacare.
Wow. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Thanks for tuning in today. It's a beautiful day. It's 2 days from Thanksgiving, Tuesday the 26th of November, and we're here broadcasting on TV, on radio. You can listen live. We put up a lot more information though on the website LaffeyRadio.com. Put up Fixing America Presents, more in-depth look for a couple of minutes at a topic, all professionally done. We put that out once a week. We got a new one up there. Take a look at it. We also do the Laffey Minute, which is some of the things you're actually thinking, we're thinking, but people don't really talk about. That clip right there, that was from Fox News, and Brett Baer there was talking about how that they knew, or they know, and I think that's the answer, that they know 80 million more people are going to have their policies canceled. Well, how many people are there in America, right? A bunch of people are kids. Was it like 150? How many insurance policies can there be? I have one, but I cover like 7 people now. One of my sons is older. So you got a family for you. They're talking about one policy. You're really talking about almost everybody. I mean, to think that 80 more people are going to get canceled. And here's the thing that I never understood. The law was written 4 years ago. Everybody knew that these people were going to get their policies canceled. The president knew. The Republicans knew. The Democrats knew. The lawyers knew. K Street knew. Main Street knew. Wall Street knew. I knew. And you knew. That's the way the law was written. It had been brought up. It wasn't like it was a deep, dark secret. It wasn't. But the problem with the media, I guess they just don't cover it till it actually happens. Then you combine that with the fact that the website, which I guess by the 1st of December is supposed to be working just fine. It's impossible. It's impossible for it to be working fine by December 1st. What we are finding, though, is, of course, many more people are getting put on Medicaid. This thing is going to balloon. The cost structure is going to balloon out of control. I am actually wondering, and I never thought I'd say this, I just wonder if some of these Democrats are really just going to say enough's enough. If the website's not working in December and there's no way that they can get people on, and 80 million more people are looking to get their policies canceled. And I've actually spoken to some people who had their policy. I spoke to one of my buddies today who had his policy canceled. And he'll be fine. He'll do something. But it's a shocking thing for many families because as a father, you know, we're always concerned all these people are uninsured, but that's not the most people. We're always talking about these people who don't buy insurance. We need to start talking about the people who actually have families, who take care of their families, who do the best they can, are out there working, and of course make sure their families have health insurance and life insurance and dental insurance if they can, and do whatever it takes to make sure their families are taken care of. Those are the people Barack Obama is so far removed from. He has no conception of what it must be like to move from state to state and worry about getting health insurance. We've done that, moving to Colorado. You know? And we went through that process, a terrible process, because I self-insure. I'm a self-employed guy. And for a while, you didn't really know what was going to go happen. Who are you going to go with? How is this going to work? That should never be. And so there are things that people can agree upon. And it's the very nature of politics today. In fact, I was talking to one of my buddies last night about the show, and he was telling me about how, you know, he said, you know, everybody's got a whole, he's a great smart guy. Nothing's going to change unless. They always point to one thing. And he was talking about the gerrymandering of congressional districts. And it's a very important point. I mean, we really just ought to start in the upper left-hand corner, I told him, of every state. Or maybe, whatever, look at the map, upper right-hand corner, and go southwest to hit 500,000 people. And then you have a congressional district. Rather than, if people had the guts to show people, and people running for office to say, this is just wrong. I mean, I'm running for Congress, but look at this district I'm in. Long, squiggly lines. And they do this once in a while. It becomes a show on, you know, 2020 or something about congressional districts. Then it just fades. Rather than what we're missing here in America is the absolute groundswell of anger that has yet to come to fruition, to bubble over. But there is a groundswell of anger because our elected officials, and it's not just Barack Obama. This is not a show just picking on Barack Obama. Though we talk about, he's the President of the United States, right? And I would definitely do things differently. He has no single conception of how to run things. And neither do the people, I think just about anybody who's thinking about running for president in 2016. Almost no conception of actually how things run. And one of my buddies from business school, the guy I was on the phone with last night, I was saying, you know, we're talking at a level that most of these people who've never run businesses, he's run businesses, I've helped run a business, they don't understand what we're talking about. They don't understand this is how we would do things. You know, we would have been sitting there a year ago on a website. Not that we would have concocted the healthcare.gov. We wouldn't have. But if we had a website, the first thing we would have done was getting someone who had made a major change. That's what we would have said. Who made a major technology change like this in the private sector? Call them up. Get them in here. Who are the best people to make this transaction, to make this happen? Okay, we get them in. Hire that person to be. I mean, we've got czars for everything. Remember, we got the drug czar, the GM. Oh, don't be started about General Motors. I got to talk about General Motors. But they didn't even bring in the right people. And then 6 months prior, 8 months prior, at some point, we would have been bombarding. We would have hired the people that would have been destroying our website. I know people like that. I got a buddy of mine, Mark, who does this. He gets hired by private companies to infiltrate their websites and break them down, break into them, then go back and say, here's what you got to do. You got people to do that so you can tell people that it's going to be private. They didn't do that. And then on the day it opened, I would have been whoever's running the joint would have been the first person in. I'm signing up. Here I go. Okay, America, let's go. I'm in. So you're in. Barack Obama's not in. People in Congress aren't in. And so just a giant fight among each other. But 80 more people are going to be canceled, and they still talk about new. It's actually they know, and they knew. They knew all the time. It just didn't become a food fight until October 1st. It's amazing. And by the way, I do have to talk about this. General Motors, another thing in the news today. And the federal government owns another X million shares of General Motors, and they're going to sell it. And it's a $10 billion loss. And all the newspapers are full of, but it's not really a $10 billion loss. You got to consider all the jobs that were saved and so forth and on and on and on. And then they never make the connection as to why this economy is simply failing to grow. Sure, the stock market's up. They're going to keep QE3 going forever, it looks like, quantitative easing. But as far as the economy growing, you got to go back to something like General Motors, where and that's why it's in the news now, because the federal government bled itself out of the situation. There was no way they could keep the entire position and sell it all at a loss on one day. It's too big of a news story. So they sold a little, they sold a little, they sold a little. And go back to General Motors, go back to 2008 general election. George Bush is for the General Motors bailout. Mitt Romney's, I mentioned the Republicans, all the Democrats were for it. They were all for breaking the rule of law and accepting the short-term, quote-unquote, benefit, I suppose, for the long-run disaster that slowly but surely, I mean, Russia's the nth degree of this, where if they just don't like what you do, I mean, I guess communist China is the nth degree of this, but if they don't like what you're doing, they just arrest you and put you in jail. The economy of America has grown because we have private property rights. Started way back when the Pilgrims not first came here, after a while, after they were here for a couple of years, and figured out that private property rights would work best rather than a communal kind of shared living. That didn't work for the first year or two. They were trying it out. We'll talk about that on Thanksgiving Day tomorrow. But when we broke up General Motors and we broke the law and we put in a car czar, by the way, the car czar, some guy's, he's on MSNBC, some guy's, he's paid like a $10 million fine to the government for like insider trading. He's the car czar. So when we did that, we set about a whole chain of events that took effect over all these million transactions and thoughts that go into this great, supposedly capitalist country, which is not very capitalist these days, where people start making decisions, should I invest? And they look at General Motors and it's just a little bit of the crack in like, no, I probably shouldn't. Shouldn't be involved in something like that. It's too dangerous to turn around. The government could come in and change the law on me, change my property rights. They're doing this here in Fort Collins, where I live. I own the mineral rights of where I live. I guess I can't frack. Not that anybody's going to, not that there's anything down below my land. But they just took away my property rights. Now, they legally can't do that. State law governs this in Colorado. But they did do it, and they voted on it in different counties for people to not be able to get mineral rights off the property. Another crack. Crack, crack, crack. And that's one of the reasons that the economy isn't growing the way it should. One of the several reasons, that regulation and so forth, and the changing nature of the laws, but actually breaking the law. So if you look at Fort Collins, and just a microcosm, you wonder to yourself, what are they going to do next? What are they going to do development rights? What are they going to do? Are they going to change them on people? And that gives you a little, should I develop here? Should I be here? All these things run through your mind, and it's a little crack. Anyway, Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We got so much more to talk about. Different articles that come out in the paper, savings rates, all that kind of stuff. We'll be right back. But check us out, LaffeyRadio.com. We'll take a quick break here.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. At 7 a.m., I shower. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. At 7 a.m., I shower. I start laundry at 8. At 10, we go for a walk. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m.
For those dealing with the daily struggles of caring for a loved one, we hear you. That's why AARP created a community with experts and other caregivers for advice, tips, and support. Together, let's help each other better care for ourselves and the ones we love. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Training is about more than muscle. It's about inner strength. So I push myself. That's why I serve in the United States Coast Guard. I train with the best. A team that shares my drive and commitment. We collect intelligence, guard our shores against drug smugglers, and keep our waterways safe, because our nation expects more.
If you expect more, maybe you were born ready. Find out at GoCoastGuard.com.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor. Because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
The working poor have become among America's fastest growing demographic. Charmaine works full-time as a telephone data collector.
I make about $250 a week, depending on the hours that I work.
On many days, the 38-year-old eats a free dinner at the New York City Rescue Mission before heading to the place she's called home for the past 5 years.
I come here to eat at the mission, then jump on the plane, get back to the shelter for curfew at 8 o'clock. You don't make it back to the shelter at 8 o'clock. They've already packed up your clothes.
A record high of 50,000 people currently occupy New York City's shelters. Of those living in them, city figures show 28% of families and 16% of adults are employed.
That's it's a hard one to take coming into the Thanksgiving season. Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America at LaffeyRadio.com. Thanks for coming back with us. So the New York homeless shelters have hit an all-time high, and 28% of the people roughly have families, are employed. Like they go out and work during the day and they try to make it back to a shelter at night. That's sort of the new America. This middle-class dream. This is not just here, by the way. Not just here, I should say, not just in New York City. But it's also in Los Angeles. It's everywhere. Where you have people who actually are homeless but are working. And of course, you'll have these people who just say, "Oh yeah, let's just raise the minimum wage," as if, by the way, that makes any sense at all. Like this living wage stuff. Let's make it $15 an hour. I mean, all you're really doing is forcing companies, especially small companies, to mechanize. I mean, take a coffee shop. So there's not the answer. They'll just find another way not to have someone work there. That's not so. But these stories come out, and they're coming out more and more. Especially with families who are homeless, who've lost. We got articles here I could read through, and people who have homeless families. We had in church the other day. We had a kid come in. He wasn't homeless, but just wandered in. He needed some food. Sat there talking with him after church and talking about God and everything, and trying to get him on the right angle. But this is an epidemic now. And what we really do, and why this thing hasn't boiled over, we just give people food. People line up for food. I mean, the scenes from the Great Depression would be replicated in America today if it wasn't for just giving people food. But the underlying causes, our trade policy with China, for example, the inability, I mean, all these cheap goods that people are we're going to be watching this fight break out on Thanksgiving about people going to get stuff, and meanwhile people who many people, it's not people, we always think, oh, the homeless, they're not working hard, they're not trying hard. It's not always like that. It's not often like that. That's a lot of mentally ill people who we let out of all these institutions years ago. But that's sort of a clip I just needed to play. We just need to play just because it's important to hear. That what's Bloomberg done about it? I mean, the shelter's just overflowing in New York. I thought real estate prices in New York were off the charts. All I do, I get the Wall Street Journal. I hear that every Friday. I get the Wall Street Journal. Be like, oh my gosh, a new record price of mansions and tall buildings in New York City, and then down below, places sort of falling apart. The whole country, structurally, morally. And then we've got, let's move on to some other topics, because that one we could talk about for the next hour. But the other topic that happened this week that I had to get in, there's so many more, is this thing called the nuclear option. And just to set it back, what we're talking about, the United States government, by our very crafty, inspired founders, we put in many checks and balances, many. Because the overriding thought was that if the whim of one day somebody shows up and can change all the rules overnight, then we can lose our republic. And so the president has the right to veto. You have two houses, et cetera, et cetera. In the Senate, it usually takes 60 votes to pass big things like a U.S. Supreme Court nominee. Can't get by with 51. You need 60. There's always been these threats, or they call it the nuclear option. And by the way, it's funny because there'll be a tragedy somewhere. We'll never be able to call it the nuclear option for 3 months, right? There'll be something that'll happen. So the nuclear option has always meant that one side would get enough power and they'd vote to do away with the 60 votes. There's 100 U.S. senators. Vice President breaks the ties and get it down to just a simple majority, which means it's not very much different than, except for the terms that people are elected for, not much different from the House of Representatives, the other side of Congress. So I've got a series of clips here, and it's one of those things like when we talked a long time ago about the government shutdown, and I said, how do you know everybody's all against us? It's like when they all voted 517 or something to 0 in the House of Representatives to pay all the federal workers all their back pay, no matter how long they were out, because it basically turning federal workers to being on vacation. Here's another way you know. Let's play some clips. This is Barack Obama last week talking about the nuclear option and why he's for changing it from 60 votes to 50 votes. He's for going with the nuclear option.
Today's pattern of obstruction, it just isn't normal. I support the step a majority of senators today took to change the way that Washington is doing business.
That's last week. So he's in favor. I feel like I'm doing one of these shows from college where I did this counterpoint show, point, counterpoint, taking off on Crossfire, but we'd all say the same thing. I'd be the conservative. My buddy Joe would be the liberal. We disagree, but we'd say the exact same thing. We all were for something, whatever it was. So here's Barack Obama, 2005.
But if the right of free and open debate is taken away from the minority party and the millions of Americans who ask us to be their voice, I fear that the already partisan atmosphere in Washington will be poisoned to the point where no one will be able to agree on anything.
So he's against the nuclear option. Like, and by the way, that's the good point. That's the point I would agree with. Last week he just changed his mind. He needs some things passed before he gets out of office, like judges put on courts and so forth, and he wants it done. And Harry Reid just says it. By the way, let's go to Harry Reid. Harry Reid last week, he's the guy in charge. Here's the clip where I want you to be confused, because it gets very confusing. This is last week, Harry Reid, Majority Leader in the United States Senate. He's for the nuclear option.
Things have changed dramatically since 2005. Dramatically. For the last 4.5 years, they have done everything they can to deny the fact that Obama was elected, and then...
So there he is. Now, let's go back to 2005. This is him against the nuclear option. I know it's confusing. This is him, same person, Majority Leader Reid.
The Senate was set up to be different. That was the genius, the vision of our founding fathers, that this bicameral legislature, which was unique, had two different duties. One was, as Franklin said, to pour the coffee into the saucer and let it cool off. That's why you have the ability to filibuster and to terminate filibuster. They wanted to get rid of all that, and that's what the nuclear option was all about.
And is there any likelihood that we're going to face circumstances like that again?
As long as I am the leader, the answer is no. I think we should just forget that. That is a black chapter in the history of the Senate. I hope we never, ever get to that again, because I really do believe it will ruin our country.
It was a black chapter. It will ruin the country. It'll never happen again. No, it'll never come up. A couple of years later, he's for it, because these guys know they're getting out of office, and Barack Obama's getting out of office, and they've got to get these judges in, and other things done that they want done. But look how eloquently Barack Obama and Harry Reid spoke against the nuclear option. It was pretty eloquent. They were pretty good on it. Now it's just brass. But then you get the minority leader, Mitch McConnell. You think he'd be consistent. We'd have some Republicans that were consistent. Let's look at Mitch McConnell when he was for the nuclear option back in 2005. He's the minority leader in the U.S. Senate.
The current Senate majority intends to do what the majority in the Senate has often done, to reform Senate procedure by a simple majority vote. Despite the incredulous protestations of our Democratic colleagues, the Senate has repeatedly adjusted its rules as circumstances dictate.
That was Mitch McConnell in 2005, simply going to change some rules. He sounds exactly like Harry Reid today. I'm sure Mitch McConnell was agreeing with Harry Reid that they should... No, let's play the clip for last week.
Rather than learn from past precedents on judicial nominations that they themselves set, Democrats now want to set another one. Now, I have no doubt that if they do, they will come to regret that one as well.
How do they live with themselves? How come there's not a clip that we can find where someone says, I really apologize for what I said before? They don't even bother with that. I've rethought my position. Here's why. They don't even say that. They just say lines. Mitch McConnell takes Harry Reid's lines from 2005 to 2008 and just reads them. Barack Obama steals lines from somebody else, from the Republican Party years ago, and just reads them. That's what they do, over and over and over. And that's how you know they're sort of all in on it. And what's going to happen when Republicans get back in power? You think they're going to say it's a disaster? No, they'll probably just keep it. But now it's actually I wouldn't call it the grave threat to our republic, but just another chink, at our situation in America, where these two sides are so far removed from actually getting to any solutions that we've talked about in our show, that they're just going to kind of collide with each other. And it's embarrassing to watch. And we're back with some more embarrassment. Steve Laffey, Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Follow us on Facebook at Laffey Radio. We're LaffeyRadio.com. We'll take one more break and come right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Picture this, your next trip, Utah, 5 national parks. First, Zion. You're walking, the ground rises, the ground drops, the ground becomes water. Next, Rice. You're riding a mule. You're riding a mule under giant orange drip castles. You are not dreaming. You will not forget this. On to Capitol Reef. Take the scenic route, the really scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty 5. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Hi. I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
Well, before I left my campsite, I was putting out my fire, and out of nowhere, Smokey Bear showed up and hugged me?
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. He likes it when people correctly put out their campfires. He's pretty big on wildfire prevention. He's just letting you know you did good with a hug. He's a hugger.
I just got a bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update!
All right, I'm going to let you go now. I've got a lot of ranger stuff to do. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
I'm always up for a challenge. It's the feeling of accomplishment that drives me. And there's no better challenge than serving part-time in the Coast Guard Reserve. I protect my country, work with the best and brightest. I get great pay and benefits in return. The Coast Guard Reserve is important work. I get to serve my community, and it's always rewarding.
If you were born ready, there's a new challenge waiting for you. Learn about serving part-time at gocoastguard.com/reserve.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
In Irvine, California, thousands of potential buyers are touring models. The vast majority of them are Chinese, and most steered clear of our camera.
They see the market here, there's still room for appreciation.
Irvine realtor Kenny Young's phone is ringing off the hook.
What's driving them over here is that they have this cash that they have, and they want to park it somewhere or invest somewhere.
But they're not just investing in real estate. They are investing in their children's future, specifically their education.
We're seeing a lot of Asians who are buying here as an investment, but their kids are going to school here.
Steve Laffey back. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Thanks for tuning in. That's just letting you all know that the largest buyers of residential real estate in Irvine, California, and thereabouts are Chinese nationals who are trying to get their money out of China, it looks like, even though they say it's for the kids who are going to school where? Oh, in America. It's absolutely amazing. The largest buyers in that area are now Chinese. And they see probably the future, what's going on in China, even though they... hopefully it's the future, because we've got to make China a lot weaker. Meanwhile, by the way, in the same area of the country, last night, Barack Obama flew Air Force One in the middle of all this stuff going on for a fundraiser at some guy's house, a very wealthy guy's house. It's $32,000 a couple to go to. They raised millions of dollars. It would be cheaper just to keep Air Force One home and just charge the government. I mean, just say, listen, it's going to be millions of dollars to get this plane up and get over there. Instead, he went over to Magic Johnson's house, famous basketball player. And I just got to go through this with you, because there's some well, let's play a couple of clips here and we'll talk about it. You know, here's the first clip about this is Barack Obama's fundraiser, literally, I think, last night.
Well, yeah, the president in town for the 16th time, and he's here raising money for Democrats who are running for midterm elections. So, you know, every time he comes here, come a lot of those road closures and always added traffic messes. Well, here in Beverly Hills, near the exclusive Beverly Park neighborhood where those fundraisers are going on tonight, a large group of protesters added to the mess.
So, I didn't say what the people were protesting, but gosh, I remember one time getting stuck in New York City. It was Bill Clinton. I was at the Ritz-Carlton, and I didn't know, or Ritz, whatever it was, down in Park Avenue. And I was trying to get to the other side, and I had to get out. And I literally had to, like, run about, that's why I don't live in New York City anymore. I had to run, like, 8 side blocks. These are not little side streets. Like 8 blocks to get down to, like, I don't know, First Avenue or something. And I finally got in a cab, and, oh, I was going to the airport. That's what it was. I had to get to the airport. I couldn't get a cab. And anywhere near when I got out of when I worked down at the Payne Weber building. And I finally made it. Nearly missed my flight. It must be 16 times the people were probably protesting him just showing up because it's a wreck. But you have to go back to what some of these people are saying at a fundraiser. Let's play one more clip and we'll come back and talk about this unbelievable fundraiser that the president had in California.
On the agenda this evening, a reception at Magic Johnson's home in Beverly Park, where Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid are on the guest list, followed by dinner at the home of billionaire Chaim Saban. Guests forked out $16,000 per person to get a seat in that exclusive home, where the president is set to speak later tonight. Now, tickets to that reception at Magic Johnson's house, anywhere from $2,500 to $15,000. The dinner following, $32,000 per couple. So you add that to the fundraising he's going to be doing tomorrow with studio executives, and it's estimated that this trip, which will be about 24 hours here in L.A., will raise about $2.5 million for Democrats.
And you have to, I just want to read this guy Sabin, he's a very wealthy guy. You have to wonder how far removed people are from reality in certain parts of the world, certain parts of our government. This one part I'll read you from. This is Sabin speaking for Barack Obama. He drew applause from the audience when he went over the record of foreign policy. Now, there's a lot of things he could have went over, right? He could have talked about it's great to have the first black president. A lot of things in L.A. could have drew some applause. But the last thing I think anybody, other than health care, that anybody would point to Barack Obama would be his foreign policy. Now, he goes on, without even, by the way, he could just say foreign policy, leave it at that. This guy, though, gets specific. And you don't even know what newspaper he's reading. He can't even be reading the New York Times. Sabin said, quote, "We're out of Iraq, we're out of Afghanistan." We're actually not out of Afghanistan, Mr. Sabin. We're not out at all. And the military intelligence cooperation with Israel, our staunchest ally in the Middle East, arguably in the world, has never been deeper. Has he seen Netanyahu on TV recently? At all? In a month? Arguably in the world has never been deeper, and the president's commitment to Israel's security has never been stronger. It's never been stronger? This is people just say things, I guess, and people are clapping. Our relationship with Israel has never been worse. When was the last time the Prime Minister of Israel came on and said this is a disastrous situation? We know we're on our, I'm paraphrasing Netanyahu about the situation in Iran. We could say the same thing about Syria. He's being surrounded by madmen who want his whole country destroyed, who say they will destroy the country. And this guy's up saying it's never been stronger and Israel's security has never been better. And people are clapping at $32,000 a head. It does not take brains to make a lot of money, I guess. But it gets worse. And I got to play this one clip. It's a little bit longer. I want you to hear Hillary Clinton, her discussions in discussing with America and what she is discussing with Chinese leaders. It's unbelievable how far removed she is from what she's done.
We have to remember our influence and our leadership starts right here at home. We have to demonstrate that our system works, that we get along with each other, that we can make hard decisions together, because people around the world watch us so closely, more closely than a lot of our own citizens watch our decision making. One final quick story, you know, I was in Hong Kong in July of 2011, and I was scheduled to speak to a big business group, and the point of being there was to try to convince Asian businesses to invest in the United States, create jobs here at home. But we were in another one of these dramas in Washington. Would we or would we not default on our debt? And all the business leaders wanted to talk to me about was, is the United States going to default on its debt? And I kept saying, oh, of course not. We would never do that, and just, you know, hoping and praying I was right. And what I saw in that incident was bewilderment. Like, how could the United States do that to itself? Especially countries that believe in our model, really cherish our values, want to be moving more toward our example. Fast forward this last time, as I talked to people around the world, there was a sense like, you know, if you guys can't get your act together, we need to de-Americanize the world, which was a phrase used by a high-ranking Chinese official. That is not good news for us. No. That is a very unfortunate conclusion. So we have to pull ourselves together, we have to stand up, solve our problems. Everybody's not going to get everything they want. We have to get back to good old-fashioned compromise, and we have to make those decisions that reassure America's leadership at home and abroad.
And you don't know what to say because she's talking about, of course, getting along. And if you notice in all of these clips and all these speeches that people make like this, she never provides any solutions. And so here she is, as responsible as anybody for the disastrous foreign policy, as Secretary of State. Think Benghazi. Think Egypt. We could go on all day about her role. In fact, it's hard to think of any success stories. I mean, we could type in Google, we could find something, I suppose. What is the success story of Hillary Clinton? Healthcare plan in the 90s that she wanted, that she tried to put in under the almost the co-presidency she was trying to align herself with. Luckily for a president, he had enough sense to say enough of this, and he was out, unlike Barack Obama, who went in way too far. He could have just stepped out of this thing years ago. Instead, he's in. Total disaster. Her foreign policy record as Secretary of the State, does anybody know what that is? Can someone mention it? Do people talk about her real successes as Secretary of the State? No, nobody does. The fall in world opinion is due not in large part, but in some part by her. But she takes no blame for it. And Sean, for president, take no blame for any of it. And so she, like this guy who gave a speech for Barack Obama at Magic Johnson's house, I guess, they're disconnected from reality. And people are clapping. And you almost think it's like people are clapping. I don't know if you know the story, but there's a story, and I don't know how true it is, but Stalin came into a room in the 50s or the 40s, I guess, probably the 40s, even 30s. And but he came into a room of his Politburo and said, look to your left, look to your right. One of the people you just looked at won't be around next year. And he purged everybody. He purged these people. He killed them. And people clapped. Oh, yeah, this is great. This is wonderful. And we have a group of people who are disconnected from the reality. The reality that our situation in the Middle East has almost never been, I can't think of it been worse. Anyway, there's so many other stories we wanted to get to today. I do want to leave you with one last thing. And that is, if you're a saver, if you save money, and you know I've talked about this, and the Fed is after you, you can't save. Can't get any money on your interest. Guess what the next step is as the Fed looks even farther down the road to keep the short-term interest rates low, even past QE to infinity. Banks look to charge for holding customers' money. They're going to start charging you to put money in the bank. Another disincentive for savers. It's outrageous. Well, anyway, we discussed a lot of things. I had a couple more. I want to talk to this Hobby Lobby situation in the Supreme Court, but maybe I'll do a whole show.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.